Welcome to On the Hill. I'm your host, John Lixette. 2018 was a packed session here at the state capitol with many issues facing Minnesotans. Today we're going to sit down with legislators from Districts 53 and 54 to follow up with our conversations from earlier in the year. I'm joined today by Senator Susan Kent, Representative Kelly Fenton, and Representative Joanne Ward, all from District 53. Thank you for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a long and very interesting session, so let's get right into it. First off, I'd like to ask you all kind of what you thought your biggest legislative accomplishment was this year, and we'll start with you.
Well, it's interesting you say it was a long session because technically speaking it was a short session, but yes, it felt quite long. I would say that the number one accomplishment that we did make was to pass on a very strong bipartisan basis the pensions bill. And that's important because it takes care of people that we've made a commitment to. It also brought all stakeholders together to solve this problem, which is also very important for Minnesotans, for our overall financial health. We need to make sure we're managing that obligation.
Representative Fenton, how about you?
Thank you. Well, for me personally, I had 4 bills that went to the governor's desk in which he signed all of the bills. Two very important issues. One was step therapy reform, which will actually bring better health outcomes by putting the patient and the doctor more in control of their treatment rather than having the health plans make the decision of what type of treatment. That was one of my largest priorities to get through, and the governor did sign that. The other real important one for me was having the guardrails and transparency and accountability around the 3M settlement. So we worked with all of the leaders here sitting amongst myself right now, as well as the city leaders and the MPCA and the DNR, and came up with something that everybody could agree with. So the governor signed that. That was a huge personal priority for me as well. The other thing is, I think we had a really good bonding bill. I'm glad to see the governor sign that. Had from transportation to water infrastructure to mental health crisis centers throughout the state, many other things, the 3 veterans homes throughout the state. So I think there were a lot of great provisions, some school safety measures in there as well in the bonding, and I would agree the pensions bill, I've always supported our pensions bill, and it was good to have that finally done and the governor signed that as well.
How about you, Representative Ward?
I think the highlight for me was not only the pensions, but the bonding, primarily because we ended up with bipartisan support on those.
And I should mention on the bonding bill, we did the Hero Center that will be in Cottage Grove and is a joint initiative between the cities of Woodbury and Cottage Grove, but ultimately will be a regional public safety training facility. That was included, and we're very excited about that.
Definitely exciting for the cities in South Washington County, so I know that they very much appreciate that in this
And it's really a regional benefit.
Yeah.
It will serve a larger region, and we need it.
All right, so we got some of the great things that happened. A couple things maybe didn't go through that we all wanted to see happen. So again, let's talk about the things that maybe we didn't see go through this year.
Well, the way it ended up being structured, it meant that all the eggs got put into 2 baskets. And as a result, some very important things that there was broad support on didn't happen, and that's really unfortunate for the people of Minnesota. Frankly, special interests, I think, had too much influence, and so what we ended up doing was the tax bill that should have been very important and badly needed tax conformity that should have been focused on Minnesota working families because they're the ones who are getting hit as a result of the federal tax changes. We couldn't get that through because of the way that was structured. It put us way out of balance in the outgoing years as the tax cuts got phased in. And then the other thing is everything and the kitchen sink went into the 989-page supplemental finance bill, which the reason it was so long was because it had so much policy in it. And in the process of doing that, we didn't handle a few things on a standalone basis that we had, I believe, intended to. School safety, which was important to so many people. The opioid crisis, also very important to Minnesotans. And then the third one, elder abuse, absolutely, yes, that had garnered so much attention, and we realized we need to be taking care of our vulnerable adults. And the opioid addiction issue, for example, we passed a really good bill out of the Senate, 60-6, but it got blocked in the House, and so it didn't go through. These were real failures for Minnesotans.
Representative Fenton, how about you?
So obviously one of the biggest disappointments is the tax conformity bill, and I think what people don't know is that we did send the governor a standalone tax conformity bill, in which he said he was not going to sign that unless he had the emergency school funding, and he actually indicated he was open to merging school funding and tax conformity as well. So we did send him back another bill that had both, actually an increase in school funding, a little bit over what he had called for. It was some new money, some other monies that were there. And so that's a huge disappointment that we sent the tax conformity twice and we did not get anything really hurting. We had rate cuts, first time in decades for low income and middle class families, desperately needed. So that was a big disappointment.
And then Representative Ward, same question.
I think that there's some different interpretations on what happened, and that's a disappointment in itself, because I think that we could have done a lot more. People need to be thinking about what government is for and what our responsibilities are, and I think that there was too much special interest and too much personal interest in some things happening or not happening in a particular way. And that, to me, has always been the biggest disappointment, when people really can't or don't put the people first and work together, listen to each other, but really also really attend to each other and figure out how to work together. And that just didn't happen on many levels.
And if I can add to, on both the supplemental finance budget and also the tax conformity bill, the governor was really pretty clear from the outset, and given some of the past experiences in recent years, he put everything in writing. He didn't want there to be backroom questions about who said what to whom and what sort of mysterious things ended up in a bill. He made it very clear in writing early on in the process, and he repeatedly asked for some of these key issues to be in standalone bills. So when they didn't happen, it's really not a surprise. And you know, one of the things we know, it's kind of legislating 101. If you want to get your bill through, you have to work with all the stakeholders who have a say in whether or not it passes, whether you get the votes or you don't to pass your bill. As Representative Fenton said, she got her bills passed because she did that work. Well, the Republican leadership in the House and Senate could not get their bills in order in a way that it could be passed. And some have speculated that this was an intentional campaign effort, that they wanted to be able to say and point fingers and say somebody else was responsible. But if they wanted to get the bills passed, they could have done it. They knew what they needed to do.
I think it's only fair that I let Representative Fenton respond to that. What do you say to that?
Again, we did send a standalone tax conformity bill, and we listened to the governor. We sent him back something, giving him a lot, not everything he asked for, but you know, this, when you're a part of government, is it give and take? I mean, you have to be willing to work across the aisle, which I think many of us did. You have to be willing to give some to get some. And so, and in the House does run a little bit differently than the Senate. In the House, we did pass other separate, smaller size bills, and then they came back, those bills came back in a larger package. So we'd kind of gone through those bills a few times. But again, it is a disappointment. Tax conformity, school safety measures, some really large bipartisan support by votes leaving the floor to the governor's desk. So it was a disappointment, but you know, it is a lot of hard work. You as a bill author really have to work hard with all of the stakeholders. You even have to go whip and garner votes for your own bills as you get through. And sometimes for me in the House, I really had to work hard with the Senate to get the Senate to bring important bills forward as well. So there's a lot of work we as individuals do when we garner support for our individual bills.
So going forward, there's always a chance that in November, a special session might be called for something like the tax conformity issues. What are you guys thinking are the chances that that's going to be happening this year?
I think it would be wonderful, because I do believe that if we, again, just like we've been discussing, there are so many areas where if we could set aside the controversial stuff and focus on the areas where there is such broad agreement, we could have done this a couple of weeks ago, and I think we still could potentially do it now. But now we're into full campaign season for the House. The Senate's not on the ballot. Well, there's one little race, but most of us are not. Those of us who are elected now aren't. And the motivation, it just seems to me, isn't there to reach any sort of compromise and come up with the solutions that we really know are so well within reach.
Representative Fenton.
You know, in terms of taking care of tax conformity, I think it would be great if we could come back, because much of the software and things are being developed now for looking into the future as people prepare to, you know, get ready to file taxes and whatnot. So I don't know that it will happen. So if that's not the case, then looking ahead to January immediately, we need to have something ready, set to get through the processes to send to whoever our next governor is, to send to their desk.
Anything else to add on that?
Yes, I actually wish we could do something very soon to be sure that we're funding cybersecurity for the elections. That was a very small piece that was universally approved, I think, and understood how important that is. And we missed some federal funding, matching funding with that.
That one's a great point, because it was just a couple of sentences of authorizing language. It would not have cost Minnesota taxpayers anything to avail ourselves of federal funding. I know, I think that's something we all agree on.
Yeah. We did pass out of the House.
Yeah, it was blocked by leadership in the Senate.
It was passed off the floor in the House, and so and I've worked a long time with our Secretary of State on election issues. I carried the omnibus last year, and that was something we'd discussed and worked on well ahead of this.
The elections are really important, but both of these ladies have addressed the idea of leadership, and leadership blocking in the Senate, or leadership blocking directing in the House. And a lot of things did pass off the House floor, but not in a bipartisan way. And the House majority had the votes to move it along. But that doesn't mean that was going to be something that could be successfully passed into law, signed by the governor.
So we only have about a minute left, so I just want to give everybody a chance to kind of tie a bow on the 2018 session. Give me your final thoughts on what happened this year. Well,
ultimately, it was just a big disappointment, because we had several major issues that mean a lot to Minnesotans and their checkbooks and their families. And you know, I'm just really disappointed that legislative leaders did not work in a meaningful partnership way with the governor to come up with bills that he could sign.
Representative.
For me personally, and for our district, there were some great wins and losses. Again, the step therapy reform is huge to provide better health outcomes, especially to those with chronic disease. The 3M accountability and transparency, guardrails around the settlement, having the Hero Center get into the bonding bill pass, our bonding bill, our pensions. So there were some wins, but there were some disappointments as well.
Finally, Representative Ward.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been quite a journey. This last session was disappointing and frustrating, and especially because we could have done so much more. We had some very clear-cut things in front of us that were failed. We failed the city. We failed our cities. We failed our state in so many ways. So I'm hoping that we can get a good, healthy, safe election in November, and we'll have people who will be willing to move forward in a more constructive way and really support the people.
Well, I want to thank the three of you so much for being here today. It's been a pleasure to listen to all this with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. We'll be back with our roundtable from District 54 right after this.
Welcome to Weekly Wire, the only news show focused on South Washington County. Our top story today, a new restaurant is coming to town and being built off 70th Street. The new establishment will feature unique cuisine, including burgers from the Orient and desserts that will be up to 3 feet in height.
A reminder that residents can only have a maximum of 3 dogs or cats in their home. You can contact the city to apply for a multiple animal license if you'd like to have more than 3 animals.
Next Saturday will be the annual craft fair in town. In addition to buying goods, you can also sell your own creations. Contact Mary Beth to sign up or for more information.
Find out what's happening in your neighborhood. Watch SWCTC's Weekly Wire on cable TV and online.
Welcome back. I'm joined by the legislators from District 54. We've got Representative Tony Jurgens, Representative Keith Franke, and Senator Carla Bigham. Thank you all for being with us here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So very interesting session this year in 2018. Let's talk about some of your accomplishments. Representative Jurgens, what do you think was your biggest accomplishment this year?
Well, first and foremost, we did get the bonding bill passed. This is a typical bonding year, and I was happy to be the chief author in the House for the Hero Center, and that did get funded, so we should be seeing dirt moving over by the current City Hall where the Hero Center is going to be in Cottage Grove. So that to me was one of the biggest accomplishments. It's one of the things that I was hoping for at the beginning of session, and I was glad that Governor Dayton signed the bonding bill to make that a reality, along with the Smart Center over in Dakota County, another law enforcement training center.
Representative Franke?
Yes, that is a loaded question. What did I get done versus what got done? I feel like personally I accomplished a lot in the House. Some things did not get done, unfortunately. A few things that I did get signed into law. One was the Seidels Lake improvement over in South St. Paul, so that was also in the bonding bill. And then I had a separate bill get signed that made it illegal to sell kratom, which is an organic supplement to people under the age of 18, or for people under the age of 18 to possess this organic supplement. It mimics opioid on the receptors of the brain, and it's kind of becoming a new fad. So we're hoping to get ahead of the curve on this and wait for the studies to come out. And along another part of that bill was to make it illegal for the inhalants on the DWI laws. So we were able to get that through, and we were happy to see the governor sign that. So there was that tragic death in Wisconsin of a Minnesota man due to the inhalants. So that was something that was really pushed forward by Representative Anna Wills, and we had that amended onto one of my bills, so that was good to see happen.
Senator Bigham, how about you?
Well, I really am proud of being the chief author of the Hero Center in the Senate, and also the Seidels Lake. The Republicans in the Senate weren't as kind on the first go-around with projects for me, but I held strong and knew that it was important for our district, and really in the end, when the House sent it on over and it was in there, I had no problem supporting it, because those are jobs. Those are good local jobs for our area. It's a needed training centers for our law enforcement, and it'll be economic development for our area as well. There are a lot of good things in that bonding bill, and it was a bonding session. There was housing for mental health. There was wetland replacement money, which I was a chief author of, which will help counties, and also parks money, about $10 million in parks money, which will help our county regional parks as well. One other, big accomplishment that the three of us were heavily involved in was the 3M settlement. The bills got through to set aside the settlement money in the remediation fund, make sure that that's targeted just for the East Metro, and also establish website and a process for private well testing, in the process with the remediation money from the 3M settlement.
And I want to circle back to the Hero Center. That's clearly a big deal. The three of you represent parts of Cottage Grove in one way or another, and it's going to be built there. So tell me a little bit about what it feels to have this actually coming to happen. I know it's been a big talking point for both police departments in Cottage Grove and Woodbury.
Well, it's been a work in process for a number of years, and in previous legislatures, they bonded $1.45 million for planning and design. And so that's why this project truly is shovel-ready. And, you know, I was a member, or actually chaired the Public Services Commission before coming to the House, and it was a discussion in our meetings then, too. And Senator Bigham, I know, has been around long enough to know, and Representative Franke, this is something that has been a need for a long time. And so I'm glad to see that it finally is coming to fruition. And along with, again, the Smart Center in Dakota County, they're really two different types of law enforcement training. They're not going to compete with each other too much. So I think it's very good for the East Metro.
I think not only, just to kind of piggyback on that, it's not only going to help officers and first responders in our area. When there is available time, other agencies will be able to use it also. And it's not just for police, it's also for first responders. It's a multimodal type training, which I think is, you know, severely needed in our area along this side of the Twin Cities. So I think all of us were very excited to see that happen, and I know the cities were too. And it's not only going to become an economic driver for jobs for the building it, but I think it's going to become an economic driver for bringing people into our communities to use these facilities and then also spend their dollars within our communities. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah. And I think that it's just, like Representative Jurgens said, it's not going to compete for, you know, they're going to serve two different purposes. The Smart Center is going to be more for dealing with mental illness triage, and also the electronic task force that Dakota County is on the front lines of will be the Smart Center, and the Hero Center will be, you know, working with de-escalation and different other training for our emergency services. One other bill that was very important for our law enforcement was having post-traumatic stress syndrome be a condition for workers' compensation. You know, as the daughter and sister of firefighters, as I've said before, what they see can't be unseen, and especially our paid on call that have other jobs, other full-time jobs, that they see some of the worst things, and then they're expected to go do their day job as an accountant or at the local refinery or with the school district and pretend like nothing has happened. And so we need to step up and help our heroes as well. And so there was a lot done to kind of put some support around law enforcement and public safety and first responders.
So Representative Franke, you kind of set me up for this next question a little earlier. A lot of great things happened. Some stuff didn't quite get done that you all wanted to see happen, I'm sure. So Representative Jurgens, what didn't happen during the session that you wish could have happened?
Tax conformity. First and foremost, that's the one thing that I felt like we needed to get done this year that we didn't get done, or we passed it out of the House and the Senate, and the governor vetoed it. And I think that Minnesotans are going to, they'll feel that when it comes time to do their taxes for the 2018 tax year. Governor Dayton, you know, at the time he vetoed it, he said that starting in January, the new legislature and a new governor can take that up again. But to me, that's short-sighted, because his very own Department of Revenue needs to start creating the forms and the booklets this fall, and they don't know what laws. I mean, they don't have any choice but to create those based on current law. And if the assumption is we're going to go in January and change that, I think that that's going to put a lot of undue work on the Department of Revenue and the taxpayers in Minnesota.
Representative Franke?
Well, and I've been saying all along that, you know, regardless of where you lie on the situation, I honestly believe the governor should have called a special session. We didn't get our work done. There wasn't enough time at the end. I would have been more than satisfied with that. But I don't know where that fell or why he decided not to, but things were left undone. Tax conformity is the biggest thing that I hear about down at the Park Cafe. People are concerned and worried about it. Some of the things that I wish we would have been able to get across the finish line were things that I worked on personally, which was the distracted driving, and a lot to do with the opioid and addiction treatment stuff. So the school safety threat assessment teams was a good bill that I partnered with Senator Bingham on and worked with Randy McAllister, now captain in Cottage Grove. Was a great bill, was supported by the governor's office in a different fashion, but we worked it through the process all the way through. I believe that that was one of the major #1 pieces that, setting everything else aside, would have made our schools in Minnesota safer because it's a proactive look better than a reactive type of situation. Like, it's not what do you do after something happens, it's how can we stop these things from happening in the first place. And I was sad to see that that got vetoed and didn't go through. So those are all things that I think that we're all looking forward to working on in the next session. And I'm planning on championing along with the distracted driving. Representative Mark Uglum retired, and on his last day here, he handed me his file, which is 1180 for the hands-free, and said, I expect you to foster this forward. So I have that on my desk, and I'm going to continue that work. So yeah, there was several things, but I think it's everything that if we hit the ground running come next session and we're all prepared and ready to go forward and the communication happens, we can get it done.
So I agree. I think it is a disappointment, and I think that with a couple of good things that came out of it, I think that's how I would describe this session. I'll speak for the House. We had 12 weeks. There is no need for a special session when we had 12 weeks to get our work done, and
The House
we
or
didn't.
the Senate?
The Senate. I'm sorry. The Senate. Old habits die hard.
Right.
The Senate really only passed 4 bills in, I think, about 10 weeks, and that's not normal, that's not acceptable. We had time to do it. And so the other thing that I was very shocked about, and I remember I've been gone for 8 years, and I spent 4 years in the House, and I know it's a different beast in the Senate, but I have never seen such a disregard and bastardization of process as I have since I have come back to the legislature. To have a 1,000-page bill with multiple subjects, each of what they've described was in that, and then also do the same thing for the tax bill and stick a shell of education funding for in a bill and expect people within 90 minutes or less to vote on it is a problem. It lacks transparency. It has to change, and it will change. I wish I had the outlook that Representative Franke had as we hit the ground running and we'll get this done. But unfortunately, you have a new administration come in, Democratic or Republican. It takes time for them to establish their administration. So I think the best thing we can do is get these bills to the next governor's desk in a timely fashion so that our taxpayers, our business owners, understand that, we've heard them, because I agree it's probably one of the top things I've heard is tax conformity. And there's a lot of good things in that bill, but there were a lot of stinkers in it as well.
We have about 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to ask if you could tie up everything that happened for 2018. How would you describe this session?
I think the best way to look at it is look at the biennium. Look at 2017 and 2018. And when you look at the 2-year cycle, we got a lot of work done. We got a lot of the budget bills done in 2017. And even though there were some things that we would have liked to have seen the governor sign in 2018, we did get the bonding bill done, and there were some other things that passed. But if you look at the 2-year cycle, I think it was one of the most productive 2-year bienniums in Minnesota history.
Representative Franke.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you look at the biennium, we did get a lot done. That's why we're not sitting here with a shutdown government, with everything being vetoed at the end, because we did pass all that stuff previously in the first biennium. Unlike Senator Bingham and others, me and Representative Juergens don't necessarily have anything to draw from as far as experience. So going forward, I would say this second year of the biennium was frustrating, but I know that by working together and working as we do in Senate District 54, and bringing that type of work ethic forward, we're going to be able to get things done moving forward, as long as we keep everybody else within and get them on board as far as that communication like we have in our area.
And I would say a little combination of frustrating and disappointment would be it. I'm glad that the governor is going to leave a legacy of fiscal stability, which was a goal it should be a goal for everyone, and he's done that. And so I think that that's important for us going into next year. It is important that the rank and file, which we all are, rank and file legislators, we're not in leadership, we're not speakers or presidents or anything. We're the ones that our voices have to be loud and clear, that we aren't going to put up with the type of process and I guess, accept how things ended the session and make sure that we have transparency for the residents of 54.
Well, I just want to thank the three of you for being with us here today. It's been really great to hear your stories from the last year throughout the session. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well, that's it for this episode of On the Hill. We'll see you next time.